Welcome to the Common Humanity podcast, where we're here to have real human conversations. Today, I am joined by Lei. I had the pleasure of running into her on the internet, as so many people do. um, and I'm really excited for her to share part of her story with us today. So, Lei, the first thing I want to know is, who are you?
Okay, for starters, I'm Leticia and you can call me Lay in short. I am a 22-year-old who has been an online peer supporter for teenagers and young adults with personal issues on Discord servers. It's a social media platform online since I was 15 years old in 2017, driven by my passion for mental illnesses and mental disorders and DEI, meaning diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have also been an advocate for dissociative identity disorder, which is DID in short, for 3 years now, after being diagnosed by a private psychiatrist in the UK when I was staying there. Now I'm trying my best to live a meaningful life with the other alternate identities inside of my body, where all of us can develop our potential and thrive in our own ways. One day, I hope to be a peer support specialist and help other people who are struggling with mental health conditions like I have been struggling myself.
Um, where to start? So you've been what did you say it was? A peer
Yeah,
support on
yeah.
Discord since you were, did you say 16?
No, 15 years old.
15,
So
15.
I was a minor helping other minors with,
Yeah.
say, their LGBT, like acceptance issues, say, family, like dramas where I can also relate to. And so it's like kind of giving them a sense of rapport, like making them not feel as alone as they might have felt otherwise.
Yeah, that's honestly, I'm so happy that exists. This is gonna age me a little bit, but Discord wasn't a thing when I was a teenager. And
It wasn't
um,
until I was around 14. So it's to be fair, it was relatively new at the time.
yeah, but uh yeah, that would have been a nice outlet to have. What has it been what has it been like um being a peer, like, because at 15 I imagine that you didn't have like a degree in psychology and you were just trying to be human with other humans. Does that seem fair?
Mhm. Yeah, it's fair to say it that way. I took psychology lessons at school back then and as an elective, so I had some basic awareness of psychology in terms of theory and at the very beginning of helping people in a support server. Like I just so happened to be there because a friend of mine was online friend to be exact was having some really difficult issues at the time. I started to help other people who happened to also talk about their family difficulties, and we were all around the same age. At the very beginning, I didn't even know, like, kind of how to put myself into their shoes, or like, I didn't really know how to approach it in a sensitive way. So I was talking like as if I was a friend of theirs, and I just kind of tried to help as much as I can, like within my very limited knowledge or kind of experience at the time on
Mhm.
how to kind of deal with the situation. Back then, like trying to my best to listen, and but at the time, I it was new to me, and I never really had friends in my life that sticks. So I was I mean, I used a lot of my personal experience at the time because I was also going through a lot of things. But then eventually, as the years go by, I kind of became more confident with the way that I was kind of approaching situations. I try to see it in the less partial way as I learned kind of took psychology for
Mm.
around 5 years so at school. So it kind of eventually I guess I learned more. I became more aware of different psychological approaches. And so it just I kind of through trial and error, I found a way to kind of interact in a way that it's kind of say detached, but at the same time not exactly like aloof. So
Yeah.
I'm still up here, but I guess I start to see in a way where I kind of remove myself from their situation for a bit and kind of you give my kind of put myself in a position like that is different from how I used to. And that took some years because I'm now 22. So uh how many years is that? It took some time and I kind of looked through the different, websites on how to support different people. So I kind of learned different things uh from elsewhere as well, not just only my own experience. Yeah.
But I think, first of all, I think it's beautiful that at such a young age that you had the drive to be I struggle, other people probably struggle, I can be there for them. Because in my own life that did not happen. I did not come to that realization until my 30s, so brava to you. um but so I think there's definitely a beauty in that, but also I think that,
Mhm.
like, as humans, as much as the studying and the understanding how the brain works and all of those things can definitely help in those situations, um I think, first of all, the bravery you had to just step in and be like, I'm gonna be there and listen to people and just like be someone that they can talk to. I think that, first of all, is incredibly brave, and second is 90% of the time I feel like that's what most people need,
Mhm.
is just someone to give a shit. um,
Like somebody who would listen and care about their situations and not just dismiss it as
yeah.
something that say, everybody has at some point. Like just because you also have it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact somebody else who is in that situation.
Honestly, I think it's the exact opposite. I think if it's one that, like, if we look at depression, right? It's so many people have depression, and there are people who are like, everybody's depressed, get over it. Like, no, everybody's depressed. We should figure out how to make the world less depressing. Like,
Yeah,
that,
I agree with that.
um, okay, so then moving into, let's go into your diagnosis. So how old were you when you got diagnosed with, let's see if I can say this without stuttering, dissociative identity disorder, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Yes, I was 19 years old. Uh, I discovered about that when I heard about it as a peer supporter online
Mhm.
when I was like 16 years old in the form of say split personality or multiple personality disorder, which is now an outdated name for disso- dissociative identity disorder. But I didn't think much about it. I kind of saw the name and I thought, I don't have multiple personalities. I only have one personality. But then there were some other entities inside of myself who act differently and they're just there. So I just didn't see it like that. But then when I searched stuff for what exactly it means, out of curiosity, when I was thinking about it one day, I realized that it summarized really succinctly about my lifelong experiences in an internal way. It really surprised me, it shocked me completely that there is a name for all those experiences I've had for more than a decade without explanation.
Hmm.
Like before, that is now explained, and there are names now, there are different terms now. I discovered that when I was studying abroad as a boarding student when I was 18. And then it was also the year where I was supposed to graduate as well, like, I mean, the school year.
Hmm.
And that really was a life-changing thing that I was experiencing. Um, so, oh, yeah, so that was how I discovered it. And then when I was 19, like exactly a year later, I during that time I was interacting with a lot of people who also have this
Hmm.
disorder, like either they're either diagnosed or they're kind of anticipating to get diagnosed, because this like process takes such a long time for people to get to, if they're using public services in general. So eventually, at that point, I was interacting with a lot of people. I was very convinced that I definitely have it, but then I want to have that closure by a professional. I mean, after all, I'm still not like a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist,
Hmm.
anything like that. So I decided to kind of tell my parents that I wanted to have a diagnosis, and my parents decided that, like, my parents agreed that I shouldn't use, say, public services because that would just take forever. So they agreed to take out a lot of their money for a private diagnosis. Uh, and I was lucky that it happened like within like around 2 visits, and each visit was around 2 hours long. And that took a lot of money, but it came to the place where I am now correctly diagnosed instead of being misdiagnosed potentially, which I almost did by the psychiatrist for BPD, which I only have like 3 symptoms out of, I don't know, minimum of 6 or something symptoms to get officially diagnosed. I mean, I don't know. They've like, she was saying, okay, if I mean, if it weren't for me like talking about these different alters, in which I used to be quite ashamed of at the time, I just didn't want to tell people about, I would have been misdiagnosed with BPD, which I very clearly I don't have. So yeah.
Um, and BPD is bipolar disorder, correct?
No,
No,
borderline personality disorder.
borderline personality. I'm just like, I'm bad with they're not acronyms, but whatever they're called, because acronyms spell out something, right? I don't remember.
No, I just tend to kind of do a lot of research on mental disorders and lived experiences, and that's why I know about all these acronyms.
Yeah.
If I didn't, I wouldn't have known otherwise. So I don't blame you.
Yeah, it's and they're just ones that I mean, I'll be honest, I was intrigued with, I don't know if it was borderline personality disorder or multiple personality disorder, because that's what it was called back when I was in high school. I remember in our
Yeah,
psychology class, we watched a movie about um a young lady that was abused as a child who developed um I bel I don't remember if it was borderline or multiple personality. I don't remember. It was 20 years ago. Um,
yeah, no, of course.
it I remember then like being, I was on like scared. I was just like, "Oh, is this my life? Is this like and I gonna one day like hear a noise that reminds me of something from my past, because my past was traumatic,
Hmm.
and just like be an entirely different person." And I rationally had that fear at one point in time, but then I
Hmm.
didn't. Eventually that fear subsided, and then my research on the topic went to the wayside, and now I mostly research things on like the not neurotypical, uh, neurodiversity kind of spectrum, because that's where
Mhm.
all of my misdiagnoses eventually led me. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, I can say I'm neurodiverse because of my diagnoses and autism and ADHD from when I was a child, but then I still have so much to learn about neurodiversity myself. And it seems to be quite a recent topic. Like I've never heard of it until around 3 years ago. So it
Mhm.
was quite new for me.
I feel like it's because it's become very common, because one, I think it is very common, but I think like a big part of the stigma about it has dropped, and there's a lot of people my age and older who are getting diagnosed for the first time in their lives in their 30s and 40s, um just like coming to terms of like, oh, so this is why all of these things happened in my life, and I wasn't just broken. My brain functions differently than they asked us to in school. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Anyway, so before your official diagnoses, like what were what's the symptomology that you experienced that you were like, this is something that I'm, whether I was concerned about or intrigued in, or what, like the thing that you're like, mom, dad, I want to get diagnosed. Like what were the things going on in your life that led you to that, other than talking to other people? Like what were the things that you were like, oh, I do that too, or I have that same experience, maybe this applies to me as well.
Okay, so firstly, okay, I developed a lot of anxiety, like because partly because of this.
Mhm,
Well, I had a lot of these different, say, quote unquote entities inside of my own self, where say inside of my own body to be more exact, where it didn't feel like me, but it definitely was me because of course it was the body, so who else could it be? I just had these say interactions with them since I was around kind of 6 years old, and then I just felt like, I mean, it kind of became normalized as I watched some anime. Like, and where I'm from, it's normal to have anime as
mhm,
well. So I watched those uh shows for children. That it got normalized in those magical girl stuff, where it just so happens to kind of mirror to some degree, like going to another portal. And I'm like, yeah, of course we all have portals. It kind of got rationalized, it got normalized. But
mhm,
as I got older, it started to become things where I might just argue with them for ages with some of them. I mean, it's like a social network, but inside of your own head. Of course, there's some pain in exchange of it, like there's some conflict. And then I started to hear as I became around uh 14 to 15 years old, where people have very contradicting opinions about me. Like one person would say, "You are so hardworking," and another person who is also a teacher would say that I'm so very lazy. And so it has me wondering as well. Like there's some other contradictions, like you're such a compassionate person, you're so sweet, you're so uh kind of you're so sweet, you're so um how do I say it? It's so pure.
mhm,
You're so you're so nice. You're so friendly. Like they become protective of me. Like there's a group of people who do see that, like kind of view me this way. Like I'm just so pure for this world and a little bit naive. And then there's another group of people who interacted with me quite often that said, "You're so cold-hearted. You're so harsh. You're so mean. You don't care about anyone and anything. You're so inconsiderate." And they're literally like opposing statements about who I am, and has me thinking or feeling that I am just crazy, but I just don't see it yet, kind of thing. Where I just have myself questioning my own sanity at some point. And I also figured that there were times where I kind of scrolled through my messages, like, or some other people online, like around my age, has said that I always referred to myself as a kind of from a third person perspective,
Mhm.
like Lay likes chocolate, and some other kind of uh comments, like, or statements, like in random like casual conversation that to other people was not normal, and that has me also questioning what on earth was going on as well. Because to me, was I probably at some point is like that's how I feel, because that's kind of detached. Like I have a detached feeling of these other entities, but then you can't really say it, right? Like these people don't know about it, and even you don't really know how to say them. So it was like they just so happen to be there, and you're trying to describe them, but then it's still you, right? So you just use a third person perspective. And there were times where I just find myself unable to do certain things that I'm normally say I expect myself to be able to do. So there's another of these quote unquote entities who tried to help somebody, but then it backfired. It wasn't the way that I would help somebody,
Mhm.
and that person got disappointed. And then I came back and I saw that if the effects of that, and I got really. I started to panic, like, oh, why did they do this? Like, why are you hurt? Like, why? Like, why did I do this? Why are you hurt? Why did this happen? I didn't understand, but then it's my fault anyway. So it, of course, all of these different factors alongside with just not remembering things that people taught me, like you're pretending to forget things so that you can ignore me, or like, or things like that. You're pretending to not commit to certain things I've never heard of. So that has me, I guess it triggers my anxiety as I became older. Like when I was younger, it's more like I always have to walk on eggshells with people. Like I was in a lot of, say, toxic friendships, toxic family relationships where there was always a power dynamic involved, and I have to go save people. Like in an emotional level, I was always really hyper aware of people's moods and always felt like I was responsible for it. And as I became older, it continued with those different people, the same people. And this also happens, which has me really, really anxious. And at some point in my exam week, in 2019, I was just kind of having blackouts. Like, I mean, meaning like I kind of felt myself black out, and kind of my eyes suddenly becoming kind of my vision suddenly becoming black
Mhm.
out of nowhere. Like, uh, yeah, in the middle, when in the middle of showering, or like in the middle of recess, things like that. And it didn't help. Like that I always had these different feedbacks, and it was constantly in a vicious cycle, and not having a good relationship with different people around me. Yeah, so it kind of definitely has me thinking before. And then I was also communicating with these different entities that I can't tell anybody about it.
Mhm.
Like I just can't, because I mean at that age I'm supposed to be kind of outgrown. Should have outgrown of these different
Yeah.
kind of things. But when I was younger, I used to express them in like uh, in the form of dolls. So I had a lot of dolls, and I kind of just put them as that so I can go talk to them directly like that. But then I started to just talk to myself as I got older, and that didn't help either. Like it just very had me like these symptoms. There were so many of them. Like I just knew them as late anyway. I just knew them, but there were other of these entities which are technically different alters or different identities as I know them now. They might not really know each other as well as I do know them, because I am really coincidentally in the position where I do know almost all of them.
Mhm.
So I can say I'm lucky, because then I it was like once I knew about this, I knew a lot of other people with, say, DID or OSDD subtype 1, which is like a variation where they don't have like full symptoms, but still is pretty much on that kind of spectrum, that they do struggle with a lot of denial. But then as Lay, I never did. But then I know some other alters inside of me who have experienced it. So, I mean, that's it's really a long story
Yeah.
and it has so much evidence. And I'm just so convinced. And so I wanted to make sure that I am right before I kind of get myself off track and what if I'm wrong
Yeah.
about it? Then I just want to make sure I'm right.
Well, and I identify with that so much because I'm starting the process of getting psychologically assessed, and I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm at the point where I assume I have some level of autism and potentially other things. My cousin got diagnosed with a whole slew of things last year, and I decided to take that step forward to get diagnosed, and just see, right? And I've had so many people say, like, well, why? Like, if you already feel like you're autistic, like you already feel like you're on the spectrum, like, what's it going to change? And to go back to something you said a while ago, like, there is power in being able to name what is going on, like,
Hmm.
know what is happening within you. Give, like, I feel like there's an empowerment that happens where you get to know yourself more, and you get to know, like, why you are the way you are.
Yeah.
um One of the things you, like, as you were talking, one of the things I thought of, because you were saying things like, you know, it didn't seem unnatural because that's what you already, like, what you always knew. You always knew, like, there was like little conversations between you and you, like, you didn't know anything else, then, and it was just, it was normal because it was what you knew. And it was like, I found out recently that not everybody has an internal dialogue. Like, not everybody has, like, commentary to what is happening in their life in their head. Like, and when I found that out, it blew my mind. Not everybody sees images in their head when they hear a story. And that blows my mind. I just assumed for most of my life that this is just how existence works. And then you find out that not everybody exists the same way. And then you start that questioning of, like, okay, so why does my brain do this and somebody else's brain doesn't do this? And where does this all line up? And I think part of, at least in my experience, part of leaning towards wanting a diagnosis of something comes from the fact that we don't live in a world that is built for people to be different, which is, I think, ridiculous because nobody's the same. But we live in a world that we built for, like, one specific type of person to think one specific way, and, like, everything outside of that box is considered abnormal, but there's
Yeah.
also no definition of normal. So if there's no normal, there can't actually be an abnormal, because
Hmm.
everything is abnormal. But I think for me, at least, that's where it kind of stems from, is that idea of,
Yeah.
like, if I know, it gives me it gives me a vocabulary that I can use to alter the world around me to make it a place that I'm comfortable living in, because
Yeah.
trying to fit everything that's going on inside of my brain inside of the box that I'm supposed to fit in is not working.
Yeah. I mean, it's really powerful to finally know what's going on with you. And like you said, it's easy for us to just assume that's how the world works based on your own experiences. until you're much older and you learn about other people's experiences and you start to not take for granted of the things that you have experienced after you know more about different people's experiences. And I just think that using a diagnosis label, which for some people could be really stigmatizing or something really constraining, but like you said, it could be very it could be a really good tool to tell people about you. It tells people about the things that you do struggle with, even though it has its limitations. You, at least you have words to tell people, and they could say accommodate you to some degree. Like they could use this as the way to understand you better, and that is also, I mean, a really good way to approach this situation yourself. And like all these different difficulties that we struggle with for such a long time is validated by having an official thing for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so next question. You said you know most, if not all, of your alters.
Yeah.
Um, how do I want to say this? I don't know if it's like, can you introduce them or can you like tell me something like, well, one question I have is, did you name them? Did they, because like your parents, I assume, named you. As you is Lay at least a nickname off of what your parents named you, or is that a name you chose?
It's a nickname. Okay, when I was younger, I used to call myself Lat as a nickname because I'm, Laetitia,
Yeah.
and Laetitia is more of a is like a French pronunciation of my actual name, say my legal name, which surprisingly I have a good relationship with that name. I find it really graceful. I find it something that really does adequately describe me.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that these other alters inside of my own body are kind of it doesn't mean that they like it,
Right.
and there are plenty of them who dislike that name. So it's something that is both a legal name to some degree and also something that I do choose to have. And Lay was a nickname that different online people called me. Like at first I just put like say very much like in a very yeah, I just put my kind of real name, first name out there because it's just so rare and
Mm.
people would just think it's something that I made up. Um and they just shortened it. At first I was quite annoyed. Like I just didn't like it when I felt like people were like kind of badgering the name. They were ruining its kind of beauty. But then it eventually became something that is beautiful in its own right. So I just kind of adapted it for myself as well.
Nice. So, well, because I wonder, I mean, the question really stems from, I mean, I personally think that there's two things about nicknames. One, and that this is just total random tangent. I don't think you
No,
can
it's
give
okay.
yourself a nickname. Like you can't be like, my nickname is this. Somebody else has to give you the nickname, but you also have to approve of that nickname. Otherwise, it's not a nickname, it's just somebody calling you names. Um,
Yeah.
but like my name does not lend well to nicknames. My actual name is Chandra. And it like people have tried to shorten it. And I'm just like, there's not shortening for that. It's like it just
Yeah.
doesn't work. um and so like over time, like mostly in adulthood, I've had people give me nicknames that are something completely different, but like I gave myself a pen name for my writing, for being an author and for my podcast and everything. So that's the name I gave myself. And it's not that I dislike my first name, but I'm not a fan of like my whole name. So I renamed myself. So that's where I was wondering.
Oh, I know about your pen name. Is it CS Phoenix?
Yes.
Yeah, I found it out. I saw your Instagram accounts for the podcast. I kind of just I saw that being put on some of this covers on the posts and stuff like that. But then you also put your real name on the podcast as your podcast name, so I do know your actual name.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and I think, well, and part of that is, I think there's, in general, I think there's a power in names, and I think there's a power in one accepting your name, but also if you don't, even if it's not accepting your name, like naming yourself and like choosing what you want to be called, whether it's your given name or the nickname you accept from somebody, like having a choice in what people refer to you as. I think
Yeah.
there's a power in that. I didn't develop the ability to correct people when they mispronounced my name, because they get mispronounced my name all the time,
Oh no.
until I was like 30. Like I just let people call me the wrong name for most of my life.
Oh my goodness, no way. I relate to that so much. Like my real legal name is Latin. And of course, as somebody who was born and raised in East Asia, it means that a lot of people would mispronounce it
Mhm.
and misspell it. I've seen like around 20 different misspellings of the same name, and it was just really appalling. And I just keep trying to correct people. And eventually it kind of just became a sort of kind of learned helplessness
Mhm.
until I went to the UK. Oh, I went to Canada for a trip, went to the USA for a trip, and people called it the same. No, no, no. People called it correctly, and it was so empowering to be called it correctly and not something that people just kind of stuff some alphabets in. And it definitely has the power. Like names are so powerful. It kind of defines the way that you feel about yourself, and kind of redefining yourself and reshaping your future is also it's something that you can also use like by giving yourself a name that you do find value in, like something that you feel like is kind of symbolic of yourself. Like it definitely kind of it sheds the power off like people who make you feel hurt by being called something else that you don't like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I had a staff member the other day. He thought he was being funny. And so the mispronunciation I hate the most is also the most common mispronunciation of my name, which is Chandra. And so he was calling me Chandra. And I was like, I'm not speaking to you. And he just kept saying it. I was like, let me be clear. I don't know who you're talking to, because that's not my name. And like he just kept saying it as a joke. And mind you, this kid, he's 15 years younger than me, more than that.
Oh
That I don't He's more than that younger than me. Anyway, that's not the point. He's 17 years younger than me. Not the point.
no.
Um and like I was proud of myself for being like, no, I'm not going to answer you until you call me by my name. And like he just thinks it's funny and funny and funny. And I stood my ground. And then he finally was like, okay, Chandra, can you help me with this? I was like, I would be happy to. And like, it's one of those things where even he was just like, it's really not that big of a deal. I'm like, but it is. Like, I spent 30 years of my life letting people call me literally whatever they want and not take the time to learn my name. And I'm not doing it anymore. Like,
Yeah.
or there's, I can't remember her name. I couldn't pronounce it off the top of my head if I tried, but she's an actress. And what I know is that she was in Orange is the New Black, and I can see her face, but I can't for the life of me remember her name. And when she went into acting, like she talked to her mom when she was a kid and said, like, I'm thinking about shortening my name so people can pronounce it. And her mom said, like, if they can pronounce, and she like named off a couple of like different, like really complicated French names and complicated English names or whatever. Because she has some sort of African name. I don't know what, and it's like 17 letters long. But her mom was like, if they can learn how to pronounce that, they can learn how to pronounce your name. And I just think it's powerful because we have our names for a reason. Anyway, that was a tangent still.
Yeah, no, of course, it's good that we're talking about this because this is such an underrated topic. Like people don't talk about this. Like people expect you to accept something that sounds, say, ugly or really like jarring or something that doesn't represent the beauty of being called something in the way that it should be called.
Yeah.
So I understand, and this deserves to be mentioned at some point. Uh, yeah, so it's good that we talked about this as well.
I'm going to ask again because I don't know if you didn't answer because you didn't want to or because we just went off on a tangent. What are your alters names if you feel comfortable sharing?
Okay, of course. Like I forgot about this question completely. Like we went on a tangent about names. I just completely forgot about it. So don't worry. Uh, uh, there's some other ones that I'm willing to name, like Onida, like there's Sapphire, there's Emerald, there's Amethyst, there's Adana, there's Janessa, uh, who is Jen in short. There's who else is there? There's Cadence. So of course there's also myself.
Yeah.
Let me go think. Like I'm thinking maybe I've missed somebody, but these are most of the main authors. I mean, think. Oh yeah, because I didn't name myself. I mean, yeah, I'm Laetitia Lane short. So I mean, there's 9 main authors at the moment like in this moment in time. So they are a little bit different than I am, like not completely the same, and probably have a different kind of story to share if they are around, which they will be. And some of them will be in different podcasts, like sharing their own stories. And so, if you're interested, you can go like listen to them at some point when they get published. Yeah. Ew.
Would be fantastic. And I would love to link that as well because I think the people who listen to this would like to hear the variety of stories that can come out of it because I just think that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna move into our game real quick and go from there. So
Mhm.
first question, what is the luckiest thing that has ever happened to you?
Um, it's really difficult for me to answer this question, but at the moment, what I can think of is that I had some time abroad, away from my parents, away from the things that I knew. Like I was having a really bad time. I was having like bad connotation or association with everything that I knew. So I got to experience a complete different kind of life, a completely different type of life. And it has me realizing a lot about myself. Like in COVID as well, I was abroad in lockdown. I I learned a lot about myself and discovered a lot about myself that I otherwise wouldn't have if I were at home. If I were with my parents, if I were with my cousins, with my grandparents, with other people that I ought to put a certain foot forward to.
Mhm.
I really find that really fortunate, and I got to study in a different curriculum than the education system that's here at wherever I am, and so I got to exert my strengths. Like it's not for everybody, but at least I got to focus specifically on subjects I'm actually good at and have potential to be not terrible at, instead of say going for all sorts of subjects under the sun, and then there are certain weaknesses. I do have really bad math myself. So if I have to study math, I wouldn't have been able to go into university because I would have just failed like very badly. I would have just fluked the entire test and the entire exam. And then it would have changed my fate completely. And now I'm a potential university student. I applied for university a few years ago. I studied early childhood studies to understand myself better, which was another author's idea actually to do so at Emeralds. And it was quite a blessing. Like even though I was having a really hard time and I ended up having to drop out of this course. And another author, yeah, Veritas, I forgot to mention. Veritas is quite a workaholic and she wanted to study something that she like has wanted to study for a long time, and she's anyway the only one who does all the coursework and stuff like that. So she's now applying for a degree, a bachelor's degree in translation.
Ooh.
And if it weren't for my course, if it weren't for having studied abroad in a different curriculum where I could exert my strengths despite the struggles that I was having, including this like dissociative identity disorder issue in my final year at school, like me secondary like school instead of say university or college, whatever you call it. Uh, I would have just not have this ability or this opportunity to apply for it at all. So I'm really lucky. I'm just really find that quite a blessing that I have managed to take care of all these things before I have to say go home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think the luckiest thing that's happened to me is still being alive. Um, because I was actively suicidal for a large chunk of my youth.
Mhm.
And I had a friend who, we'll go with, conveniently knew my tells that I wasn't in a good place and would show up at the exact right moment to make sure that I stayed alive. And then just a couple years ago, it was very lucky because I almost accidentally took my life. Um,
Oh
and
no.
the only thing that stopped me was I got a text message from my friend in the middle of the night who then talked to me until I fell asleep. And I realized when I woke up in the morning that I, in a, we'll go with, drunken stupor, had collected all of the pills and alcohol in my house with the intention of taking them. And had he not texted me right then, I might not be here today. And so that's,
Mhm.
I'm gonna say that's the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me.
It's really amazing to have people like that in your life, like especially when you're struggling and having a really difficult time with self-harm or suicidality,
Mhm.
stuff like that. I mean, I have one of my the different another alter inside of me, like Sapphire. She does struggle with suicidal ideation, so I can relate to that like struggle to some degree, like as much as I could.
Yeah.
Like I felt like it is really a blessing to have somebody to talk to and to express yourself, to feel heard in those really critical moments that if you didn't have anyone, you would have been dead
Yeah.
at this moment. And it really is a blessing, as I'm really glad and happy to hear that you have somebody like that in your life.
Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. But I also think that I should define DID just in case people don't really know what that is. I think I wrote that on my phone. I mean, typed that on my phone. I just thought people should know about that because a lot of people have no idea outside of the community. So I will start. Okay. DID, again, DID is a dissociative disorder that is caused by prolonged early childhood trauma, typically before the age of 6, that is so overwhelming to them that they cannot see themselves escaping from the situation. The brain uses this as a survival mechanism to keep the child under the radar of, from other people, and live through all those difficult moments like unnoticed, usually, because if they were noticed, they would have been harmed or kind of whatever thing, like usually could be quite abusive situations, uh, until they are in a safe place where from what I've noticed from myself and some other people, that's usually when they collapse. Okay. This involves being, say, unable to remember much about your past, including very important things about yourself, like the schools you went to and the friends you made in them. For people with DID, instead of having a united self, like you having a family part of yourself and a career self that are all undeniably interchangeable. Like if you have to go to work suddenly, you would just kind of change that kind of thing inside of yourself. These different parts of people who have DID, like they still remain separate from when they were a newborn baby or a toddler. And those parts eventually grow to have their own identities over time. So that's how I have, Sapphire, Veritas being somehow really different in some ways. Like if you really know me, or if you do kind of listen to the contents they made, is they really do paraphrase some things really differently, and they sound different too. I mean, in my case, they can have very different accents, so they wouldn't sound British. I know Veritas sounds uh Cantonese Chinese accent, so it would be quite different than the way I would have sounded now. Okay. uh and when you look at another identity or alter, you feel a sense of detachment from it. Like in my case, like what the things that I know that Veritas experienced, they don't really feel completely like what I experienced. But I mean, I know it's still a part of me because it's in my body. Like I wouldn't just have your memories,
Mhm.
right? So I know it happened to me, but it definitely didn't feel like it's me. It felt like it happened to somebody else, as if those things just have never happened to, say, Lei,
Mhm.
like they are a completely different person in some cases where people in the community or people with DID or OSDD subtype 1, they like to say that there are multiple people inside the same body, which can feel that way, but undeniably there's still different parts of yourself. So they are, I like to use the word alter to kind of encapsulate both sides of the coin, because if I say they are just different parts of me, you would easily think that it's like the part of me that goes out like performing, or another part of me that likes eating cereal. Like it's not as simple as that, but they're also not fully fledged different people who should have in it. Yeah, they are not completely different people, because there is a link between the things I experienced and the things they experienced. But I just like to use the word alter. Like it just seems to be quite an appropriate term, because using the word people also be like you think of another individual person with their own body, which
Yeah.
is not accurate. So yeah, I mean, I just think this is important to kind of mention before, like I mean, in the episode,
Yeah.
again, so people would know and not have the wrong idea about it.
For sure. Um, so much stewing in my brain right now.
No, of course, yeah, ask away. I love answering questions.
Um, honestly, my question is this, and it has not it's not about you, it's about me. After
Okay.
this, can I send you a piece of writing and get your, not your professional opinion, but your experiential opinion on it?
Yeah, of course, you can send that to me.
I
I love
will.
that.
I will. Okay, so your next random question. Do you remember, oh, who do you remember from your school days? And that can be literally any age of school. And what do you remember about them?
Um, I do remember some moments from school. I know Veritas went to a lot of our school. like things like going to class or doing homework or
Mhm.
having exams. I never had any of those things like having an exam, so I would have been very worried if I did. But what I do remember at school was when I was around 17 years old, there was a teacher who, an English teacher, ironically, where I was the best English student in class because I was just the best at English. You know, I'm just very fluent. I've been very fluent in English for a very long time. It's technically my first language. So then, ironically, usually the English teachers in the school will favor me. They would like me because I'm good at it, right?
Right.
But then this teacher was very harsh on me, and she even made me cry. So she kind of punished me a lot out of very small little reasons. And then she would just kind of brought me to a place with a lot of different students working around in that outside of staff rooms and stuff like that in like a really wide area. And I just and she made me cry. Like she insulted me. She insulted me for the things I do at home, which for some reason my parents told her about because she's coincidentally the vice no the vice uh vice class teacher. Is like the second in command to my actual class teacher. So she used that power to kind of that power as an authority figure to know about everything that I do at home, like struggling, like talking to people online and stuff like that, and used it against me. So it was very unfair. And that was what I mainly remember. I was really humiliated, and there were also like 60 or 70 different school members, like, you know, staff members and students who looked at me as I was just bawling my eyes out because she kept on embarrassing me and she made it worse. Like, I mean, I tried my best not to cry, but it happened. And I went to the bathroom afterwards. Not the bathroom, I mean the toilet, the loo, like after recess, and I just kept crying and I just tried to compose myself before going back to class, in which I also got punished by her for getting late in the classroom, like late as in like already did their greetings and then they just came in after they started to teach something. So it was very bad. I mean, at that time, it was just yeah.
I am sorry that you had to go through that. That sounds like that lady needs to be punched in the throat. Um, sorry, sometimes I resort to physical violence, or at least talking about physical violence. Um, the person I thought of when I read that question was my best friend in kindergarten named Jessie Fieldgrove. And all I remember about her is her name and that she was blonde, had like long blonde hair. Because I moved away after that. I just remember like so I didn't have a lot of friends in elementary school.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't have friends in elementary school. And like I really hung on to that. I was like, this girl is my best friend. Like 7 years old, knowing I'm never gonna see this girl again because we don't live in the same place. And I held on to, I was like, my best friend is Jessie. She is my best friend because she was my best friend when I was 5. And thus I was like, I can hold on to that forever. And I think that's probably one of the few things that got me through like the first bit of elementary school, because like if I didn't have that to say to myself, I would have had to say I don't have any friends. And I was like, I have this one friend who I'm never going to see again, but we are friends,
Yes,
best friends.
that sounds better to your brain. Like as a child, you do want to feel some sort of companionship, and
Right.
you don't. I mean, if you don't have that, that could be quite difficult for a child, like especially when they see other people around their age having friends. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense at the time that you would do that because at least it kind of comforts you in a way than saying that you have absolutely nobody at school, you have nobody to talk to, nobody to play with. I understand that. And when how do you get through that and realize that she's not technically your best friend when you're not going to meet her ever again.
Honestly, I think I realized that in my like 20s, right? Like I
Oh.
stopped saying she was my best, but like I somewhere in my teens, it turned into like my best friend when I was a kid was this person. And I
Mhm.
think I realized somewhere in my 20s that like I'm never going to see this person again. And I think I have at some point like tried to look her up on like social media, but when we're already adults, and that's probably not her last name anymore. And so I haven't found her. And if I did, I don't know what I would do because like be like, hey, remember me? I was your best friend when we were 5. Like that seems weird.
Yeah, and I also like people she might have forgotten about you,
Right.
like even if you remember her, and she could be another person. Like it could be another person that you like looking out for at the end because
Yeah.
she could have changed, and
Mhm.
yeah, and there could be somebody else with the same name. Like there could
Exactly.
be like 3 people with that name. You're just gonna try them all.
Yeah.
So I mean, as sad as it is, like, I mean, I understand that there's a sort of kind of grief that comes with it, like having believed that she was your friend, and it was more of an ideal image of somebody who could be your best friend. Yeah, that could be quite painful when you realize that. I can imagine.
Yeah. But then also looking back, it's there's also the piece of I have no idea why I was friends with her. I don't know if she was a nice person. I just know that proximity put us together in kindergarten. So,
Yeah, I understand.
so your very last question. If
Okay.
there is one thing that the world needs to know, what is it?
Um, there are a lot of people who seem fine on the outside, but they're actually struggling on the inside. And sometimes people don't actually know that they're struggling. They just think it's a part of life, it's a part of reality. Like they don't believe that they need help, but you could be the person who makes them realize that they do need support. They think they could manage it all by themselves, but they don't actually they aren't actually able to do that. Like they don't know that they are in denial. A lot of people don't want to admit that they have vulnerabilities or weaknesses in certain areas of their life, but then it will take time and you can't force help on them. Like if they don't want your gratitude, you don't want if they don't want you to listen to them, you don't want them if they don't want you to be around them or support them or show validation. You can't just kind of force your way through because that would just kind of bludger, kind of just ruin the relationship you have
Hmm.
with them. And I mean, it is a process. You have to be patient. And that's what I've learned. I mean, like you could use experience, but you can't just impose it on somebody else. You can use it as an example, but it's always you. You are you, and they are them. So you can't really kind of just use up all your efforts to kind of yeah. You can try your best, but you can't give more than what you can give. Like you also need to save some of your energy for yourself. Like you need to recharge your batteries. You can't I mean your self-care is just as much important as taking care of other people.
I agree 100%. You can't pour from an empty cup. So
Mhm.
you got to be able to fill that cup if you're going to help others.
Yeah.
Lay, this was a fantastic conversation. I am so glad that I met you and that we got to have this conversation. And thank you for joining me on the Common Humanity podcast and having a real human conversation with me.